Welcome to the Nui community. I'm Julie Correa. Today we have with us Andrea Nucete-Elliott. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here, and thank you for allowing us in your home.
Yeah, welcome.
I felt like, knowing more about you and the fact you're a professional volleyball player, that we needed to have just this energy around us.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We got the net, we got the balls. We can get out there if you want to.
Okay, you'll have to teach me.
Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready. I actually am ready at this time in my life. Let's do it.
Okay, anytime.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for coming on. When I first met you, I was so, I was moved by the fact that you were so open with me right away about your story. And I think that helps so many others in the world because you're not afraid to express who you are and what you've been through. And when that comes out, if somebody is afraid to express who they are or things that they've been through in life, they're immediately able to say, oh my gosh, I've been through that too.
Right. Well, it wasn't always the case. Mm-hmm. I had a very hard time discussing my story until a little before meeting my husband. And I didn't understand the power of vulnerability. Now I think that is a very strong suit of someone's personality. The fact that you're able to share openly what happened to you doesn't mean that it identifies you or defines you.
That's right.
A lot of people will react as say, whoa, I would have never thought that about you, seeing you or just not knowing you very well or by watching you interact with others. Whereas learning how to share and learning how to be vulnerable became almost like a superpower, knowing that I can just be who I am, and if that's inspiring to you, that's good. Mm-hmm. If that is triggering for you, that is probably an indicator that you might want to start your healing journey sooner rather than later, or just a good indicator to learn how to look inside and say, hey, why did that trigger me so much? What's going on inside of me that is causing me to feel a certain way? That's usually how it happens. I learned that being vulnerable is very good superpower to have in a world where connection and real human interaction can have an impact in how we see the world and how we live our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about your journey. I mean, just from the moment you were born, I know, but I'd love to share with our audience because I think it's important to where you are now and all that you've been through. So can you share with us about your past?
Yeah, so we'll go through the logistics first, and then whatever questions you might have, you can just chime in. I was born in Venezuela, and I was lucky enough to live on a Caribbean island until the age of 11. My heritage is half Italian and half from Ciudad Bolivar, which is, in the Amazon part of South America. And I lived majority of my childhood with my Italian grandparents. My mom and my dad divorced when I was 2.5, and her presence in my life was the main turmoil and the main, pain point of my living until my early 20s. Once I turned 11, I was in 5th grade. I remember I was pulled out of 5th grade and I was told we were moving to Italy with no heads up, nothing like that. I was a tennis player in Venezuela. I was on the good path of becoming a professional tennis player. And when we moved to Italy, we moved to a small town called Nola, which is inland from Naples, behind the volcano. That's where my maternal grandparents were originally from. I tried. It was very strange to me. I didn't speak the language. They speak a dialect that it's very similar. It's a mix between Spanish and Arabic. So I didn't truly understand much I was very different than the rest of my peers and the people that then I would have to live and go to school and live my adolescence with.
Yeah.
So I felt like an outcast for sure. I came from a different culture. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that age in general is so challenging. So to be uprooted to an entirely different country where you don't know the language and to feel it's got to be,
Going to that, looking back, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, it was a combination of factors. It was the cultural change. I was always in a bikini. I lived on an island, so I was always barefoot. I would shower in the rain. I didn't have running water. So it was, a lot of things were different. And I moved into originally the little apartment that we moved into it was 4 people into a 2-story, 1-bedroom, like a very small.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know how many square feet. I slept on the kitchen floor for 3 years. Like my mom slept on the pull-out couch. I slept on the kitchen floor, and my grandparents slept upstairs. It was literally the space we're kind of sitting in right now, having the setup, times 2, and that was it. And it was inside an old jail, so like a historic monument. So think about a cell times 2, and that was like my house. So that was traumatic for me. I was used to being outside. I had never seen the seasons change. I had never experienced the cold. I remember one time walking to middle school. I had my jacket on, and I was just walking with my books in my backpack, and I go like this, and I see like
your puff.
Yeah, like my breath in the cold, and I was just like. And I think I started like just doing that the whole walk because I had never seen it. Yeah. I had never experienced, I lived on the equator, so everything was summer all the time. So there were so many changes that came besides just me my age and learning how to mature into my young woman's body. And, a lot of the things that happened then were also charged with a lot of other psychological baggage that I carry with me. I didn't know that at the time, but it was a lot of transitions, a lot of change. But I wasn't fully aware, to be honest with you. I wasn't fully aware of that. Once we moved, it took a couple of years to adjust, for sure. Unfortunately, I had to stop playing tennis. I was withdrawn from participating in the sport.
You were withdrawn from participating?
Yes. So my mother, she was very abusive to me growing up. All sorts of true abuse, from hands-on abuse, so physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally. There were a lot of moments in which the only things I would hear from her would be, "You're the biggest mistake of my life," always, day in and day out. I think now, if I am a third party looking in, she's severely ill. I no longer have a relationship with her, but that she wasn't cut to be a mom. She needed to resolve her own issues. I always wonder what happened to her. I always wonder what made her behave the way she did to me, knowing that I wasn't the true cause of her behavior. Right. I didn't know that at the time. But going back to tennis, she withdrew me from tennis. I was becoming really good. I was going to turn pro that summer and participate in my first professional tournament. And looking back, I think it was out of spite. In some sort of way. She sabotaged a lot of my life in many ways, in any way she could and any chance she got. But I remember that summer I was really angry, so I loved tennis, and it was my constant. I moved, I left, I loved to compete. So that was taken away, and it was unfair. There was nothing I could do about it. I was very, very angry. Imagine a 14-year-old that is receiving a lot of validation that I needed through a sport because I was really good. and that then takes away from you.
Well, and it supports your mental health. You know, it's like when you don't have anything else, when you've moved to another country, when your relationship with your mother is, you know, not serving to you as a young lady, but you had tennis.
Yes. I had something that was an escape to my reality. You know, I was adjusting to school. I have been historically a very good student. So I was thriving into the process of learning, which I love. Still today is one of my favorite things to do. I love to learn. So that being taken away from me was a big part of my identity. I, for the following 16 years of my life, wasn't able to listen to a ball on a racket. Like, I wasn't able to watch a match. It was a very high intensity trigger point for me. Yeah. So I removed myself from anything and everything. I probably could have gone back to it if I wanted to, but it was so painful that I didn't even think about it. And I started playing volleyball. So that was, you know, I supplanted the need of a constant or a competition with a sport that I'm very grateful for and I love, and I absolutely just dedicated a lot of my life until I moved to the United States. You know, I competed and I played volleyball overseas, and once I moved here, I was 22.
So you're 22 now.
Yeah.
You're playing volleyball.
Yeah.
And then you come to the United States.
Yes.
Okay.
First reason why I came to the United States was to visit my dad.
Okay.
So this comes back into the picture. So
you've been estranged from him this whole time, or was there communication?
Kinda. Okay. So we would be in touch every year or so. It was easier when I was younger because we were in the same country. Once I moved out, you know, he had to sign for me to leave. He was okay with it, so I took that as a hit for, okay, you're okay without me. Like, you are okay sacrificing my presence in your life. But as a child, as an adolescent, and as a young woman, I always wanted to form my own opinion. So he called me in one of our yearly check-ins, and he was like, "How are you doing?" I remember I just finished working in a pizzeria. I was the cashier girl. It was one of my weekend jobs, and I was really good with numbers. So I remember finishing my shift and get out and get this call from him. And I'm like, "Oh, wow. Hi, how are you?" He's like, "Good." I'm like, what's happening? What's going on? Because the situation in Venezuela politically was deteriorating very fast. You know, he had gone through some very unsafe episodes with him and his family. He worked for a company whose base was in Houston because of the oil and, you know, transportations. And there were still relationships between the United States and Venezuela in that realm. So he calls me and he says, "How are you? I want to let you know we're moving. We're going to Houston. You know, we have some family there. And we'll start our journey, you know, in a new country." And at the time, a lot of things were happening in my life that I decided it would be a good time. I always yearned for love, always. I always wanted to be seen. I always wanted to be told that they were proud of me. I always strived and held myself to a very high standard because I wanted them to tell me I was enough. You know, that knowing that the underlying sentence was, you're the biggest mistake of my life. I wanted to change that. You know, I wanted to be, hey, I'm doing all these things so that you're proud of me, so that I'm not a mistake to you, so I can bring something happy to your life, so that you see me and you see, oh wow, but like, she's really good at this, or she's really good in school, or, you know, she's a bright young lady. And I was a rule follower. You know, I was like, I'm gonna be so perfect, and I developed, you know, a lot of, a lot of like,
I get that.
I don't want to move the wrong way because I don't want you to be upset. So I decided to come visit. My dream was to be a neurosurgeon. So I played volleyball, and I wanted always to be something I would pick. So looking back psychologically, this is I would pick the hardest thing and I would want to do it. And that is the reason why I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I wanted to accomplish one of the hardest things that you can accomplish as a female. You know, I never had met a neurosurgeon that was a female. It is still a very dominated male field. It is very difficult, especially if you want to be a mom and then continue that career. It's a lengthy career, even to get there. Yeah. So a lot of things were brewing there. I was considering applying to medical school in Italy, but then that phone call came through, so I said, I'm just going to go visit.
Hearing what your, just the lack of communication with your dad and then the way your mom treated you, it still seemed like you had, and still do, I don't want to say had, but at that time, when things were really challenging in your life, you had this belief in yourself. Because to say, I'm going to go be a neurosurgeon, I'm just saying, like, you know, that takes a lot of self-efficacy and, like, power, even if you're doing it for them, to believe you can do it, you know. I think that there is something, I just wonder where that came from. Do you think that was from sports? Do you think it was like when you learned to play tennis, you're like, oh, wow, I'm powerful and this feels good because I'm doing something maybe I wasn't supposed to be doing?
You know what is very absurd? That not once ever did I have that thought process. Not once ever did I think I was confident. Not once ever did I think I was powerful. Not once ever did I look at myself and said, oh, you're it. Like, let's go. It was always, I was driven by fear.
Okay.
I was driven by the ultimate fear of not being enough. And being just mediocre. I was terrified of in anything that I did. And, you know, we tend to think that fear or extreme feelings are wrong, but I think that ultimately saved my life. You know, I was terrified of not achieving the best grade I could. So I did my hardest to be not just the elite student, the only one. So it was a driver. Like when you say where it comes from, I think it's the fear of failure.
I see.
Fear of not being enough, fear of failing who I've been always really big on words. Words of affirmation are for me a very big deal. You know, I don't say what I don't mean. And when I say it, I mean it. A lot of the things that I hold myself to that standard. If I tell myself I'm going to do something, I will do it. And that I don't know where ultimately comes from besides the fear of just being left alone if I am not the best. And in becoming the best, it became an obsession. You know, it became, and I've had this internal struggle, right? Like, I am not an egotistical person, and I don't think things are about me. But I think that if someone else was watching me from the outside, they would observe an immense amount of extra work that a lot of people do for external recognition. And I am in some sort of way guilty of that because I wanted it from my parents.
Right.
But I was getting it from my coaches and I was getting it from my professors and my teachers. And I loved that. I liked the way it made me feel. So I worked harder because I wanted more of that feeling and less of, oh, I'm not good enough, or I'm going to get beat, or I'm going to get locked in the closet, or I'm going to get forgotten. You know, I became invisible a lot of the times because I didn't want to trigger my mom. So that fuels me, you know, in a way, still today. You know, it's something that I think has become a trait of my personality. I I work better in situations that are adverse, and they bring the best out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it interesting how we can take those traits that maybe didn't serve us at one point in a way that, you were searching for the outside recognition, but then you can turn it around and take that and use it for the greater good of things that you're doing.
Right. I don't know if I consciously made that change, or it became a part of my upbringing, like a part of my maturing and going from someone who needed external validation from her parents in some sort of way. And then it started to be an internal conversation with myself.
Right.
Why are you doing these things for? And I don't have recollection of when there was a moment that was life-changing for me. Besides just, I remember having these thoughts, after turning 18, I started to have these internal conversations with myself. What do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And I, relied on the fact that when I was a kid, I would make lists. So I was always very observant, and I experienced a lot of things that I couldn't talk to anyone about. So I would write, instead of writing how I was feeling, I have never been a fabulous writer. I would make this list about who do you want to be? Like what traits, it's almost like when you play a video game and you make your character. So that's what I fell back on. And I remember having this almost like journals or like to-do lists, but to me were like my to-be lists. Like I will be loyal, I will be truthful, I don't want to yell, I don't want to raise my hands to anyone. So I kind of like started to have this idea of who I wanted to be. Some people today might call it, I don't know, visualization, or in some sort of way I started to kind of like build my character because I couldn't have these conversations with my mom or with my grandma. My grandma was a big part of my life in a way that she was there for me for the house things. Like she taught me how to cook, and she taught me how to, carry yourself in a way that other people would see you in a good light. She was a very religious woman, and she had some limitations in her thought process when it came down to fronting the truth of the reality of things. But she taught me, some things that I wish my mom did, but I just saw her do those things, and by osmosis, I would say, I just grabbed those and added them to my list, and it was probably from an older generation. She was 15 when she jumped on a boat, and for 21 days she moved to Venezuela. She was a World War II immigrant, so she left Italy to go to Venezuela, and that's how, that side of my family ended up there. So that's, a big part of how we think of ourselves. So we were talking about earlier, mindset, I think some sort of invisible hand guided me through the process of trying to make the best decisions for me. For sure, a big part of that is wanting not to disappoint the ones that I wanted affirmation from.
Right. So. Yeah, absolutely. And then as part of this writing list of who you want to become, like when you're talking to your dad in that moment, was this a part of like, okay, you could see yourself visually, like this is the moment when I need to make a big transition and go visit him? No,
really. So it was interesting. I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was very supportive of me coming to visit my dad. And, I had never been to the United States, and I didn't speak English 10 years ago. So that was a big move in a way. You know, I was scared, but he was supportive of me. He was older than me, and he provided a good foundation for thought process. You know, he said, there's nothing wrong with you being curious about who your dad is. And that then merged with my values of, I always form opinions of what I think based on what I experience, you know. Because in high school and in middle school, a lot of other girls and classmates would say things about me that weren't true. I never liked judging people based on what I thought, with no facts or no interactions or no, experience of them.
That's right.
I thought it was very disrespectful. So I granted the same treatment to my dad. I'm sure unconsciously a part of me is like, oh my gosh, we're going to have this great relationship. I'm going to go visit and we are going to rekindle all of our, lacks and lack of interaction in time and all these things and all the movies that we see. They are wonderful when that happens, right? The reality of it is nothing like that happened. Yeah. I came to visit for 12 days. And it was like in March 2013, April 2013. And nothing special happened. He was working all the time and I was home with my stepmom and my half brother and half sister. So I was like, okay, I'm here and I want to kind of like get to know him. And in me just triggered, I got to experience other things. And I was just like, okay, this is not too bad. So I started getting this idea of like, oh, I could come here to school. And I kind of like it. Like, people don't judge you. Like, people are themselves and they go out in pajamas and there's big flags. The flags are still a thing for me. Like, when I'm driving and there is like a big flag, I'm like, oh my God, baby, look at the flag. So it's a funny thing. I had never seen a flag that big when I landed in the U.S.
Especially in Texas.
Like, the things that we don't,
right.
They're silly and they stay in your brain. But I started to marinate the idea of moving. And I was looking for the professional volleyball league here in the United States that didn't exist at the time. So I wanted to go to school and I also wanted to play volleyball because that was the constant at the time in my life. Right. I started to play volleyball and it was a challenging thing for me because it was a team sport and I came from an individual sport. And it was a new dynamic and it was all women and I had to learn how to navigate that, and that presented a challenge on its own.
Yeah.
That I didn't appreciate probably until I was done playing, but I wanted to continue. That's all I knew. I wanted to play volleyball and then go to school and maybe I could change. Maybe my boyfriend at the time could come. That didn't end up happening, but I did apply for schools here and I got in.
Nice.
So I was just like, okay, this happened. And I had really good grades. So I had really good resume to be in school. And I thought about it over the summer. And October 1st, 2013, I moved. I had all my volleyball savings were put away. And that was my happy sleep money.
Right. From playing professionally in Italy.
Yeah, so put them there and just forgot about it. I said, I don't have anything. I moved here with $375. And I was like, well, here we go. And hold your horses. Let's go. So I did that. And I think the underlying hope was I could have a normal relationship with my dad. This was 2013. And he ended up passing away in 2016, which I am happy I made originally that change for him to try to get to know him. And I ended up learning a lot of things about him that would explain his behavior over time. And, the same question that I would ask about my mom, like, I wonder what happened to you for you to behave a certain way. So that's that's kind of how I'm here in the United States. So long answer to your short question.
No, but it's good because it really breaks down, exactly what we're talking about today is around, mental health and where people come from is important because it does set the foundation. And same thing like you're talking about with your mom and your dad, like what caused this? What caused you to treat me the way that you did?
Right.
And there are reasonings, right? And so I think it's just important to know, and for other people to know, they can maybe resonate with your story, especially like coming over from another country or trying to figure it all out and still, and from the outside, like for me, because I thought, oh my gosh, you just must have this like, not even grandiose image, like an image that I want my daughter and I want women to have of themselves. Like we can do it. Like I really thought that you had that, like, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. Like I can do this. I've got this. And you're like, no, like fear was driving me.
Yeah.
That's so important, to understand that there is a driver. Let's try and get the driver to be like, I can't do it because I'm awesome, and I hope now it is, but it's all a part of trying to, help others see that like when you, and let me go back a little bit too. It's also a journey that I think we have to go on,
yeah. I mean, when you look, my husband and I now talk about, he's involved in college athletics and we talk about the greater ones, the greater kids that come and compete, and we're all a little bit crazy in a way of we've gone through, we ask ourselves, like we sit down for dinner and we've had a long day. And sometimes this question comes about, what do you think they have? Like, where does that drive come from? Mm-hmm. Where does the ability to shift different gears in their competition comes from? Where is there, it's almost like an endless hunger for achieving something. And I think comes from adversity. It's very simple. I think it's a very easy concept to look at. You will find certain behaviors more present in people that have gone through more adversity at a younger age, which is unfortunate. It's a very sad that is the result. And I know that it's not the result for everyone, but I think it's the result for people that might be genetically predisposed to thinking a specific way, or they were exposed to things that were aspirational for them, which was my case. I was very lucky to attach myself and clutch onto the things that would improve me instead of the ones that would deteriorate me.
Right.
And I don't know where that came from. It was probably a choice that I've made over time. And, I was presented with a lot of opportunities to take the opposite direction and go into different vices and into, things that weren't going to be profitable for the growth of myself. I was never interested in them. So where that comes from, I don't have the certainty to say, but I think comes from being hit with life a little bit earlier than you need to, and having to overcome, knowing that you're on your own. Or sometimes you'll have a brother or a sister and you guys, hold hands and you're like, here we go. Yeah. It's just us. We got to figure it out. So that, adversity that brings you to think differently, that sometimes takes away your innocence, and sometimes it is unfortunate that is the result of what greatness a lot of the time becomes.
Yeah.
When we're looking at different people that have been really successful, almost all of them have a common denominator of adversity.
It's so true. And that's why I started doing this a few years ago, because I always felt like I was so alone in this world, and that there was something wrong with me and that everybody else had these like amazing families and these dynamics and everybody else was happy. And I was the one, that was messed up. I'm not using the F word on here, but that's really how I felt. And
I think a lot of people that are thinking through deeply on things that, are not common in conversations, we think that it's just us.
Right.
And we're alone. And that it's a common denominator when you're thinking about mental health and you're talking of people that are suffering of depression or, have suicidal thoughts or things like that. They think they're alone.
Right.
Or they think that there's something deeply wrong with them that can be fixed.
Yeah, and it is very lonely when you're in it. And I think, for me, I was like, okay, well, the numbers don't add up because it says that 1 in 5 people, are going through this. So where are they? And that's when I was just like, we need to talk about this.
Right.
And so it is important. I think the details are important because more people are going through it than I think even the numbers suggest. But
I agree.
One of the things I do find interesting now that I'm starting to talk to athletes more is that I feel like even though it's such a hard road, being an athlete is not easy by any stretch of anyone's imagination. And I've never been one, so I don't even truly know. But it does seem that it is a way that still kept you, what you were saying is grounded and almost like on the right track.
Yes, he saved my life.
Do you feel like you hear that from other athletes?
It's interesting. Yes, and I think a lot of things are changing when it comes down to mental health, and especially in the United States with college athletes, with social media, with especially those two. When they are combined, they can become a dangerous potion for mental health. It saved my life because it was my happy place. It was what I chose. No one asked me to do it. I wasn't doing it because I needed a scholarship for college. I wasn't doing it because my parents were pushing me. I wasn't doing it because of any other factor besides it made me happy. And I think nowadays there is a little bit of the parents living vicariously through their kids, wanting them to be athletes with all that it entails. And also there is a big, change in the way sports are organized. I played a lot on the streets and I played creatively in unorganized sports. We would come up with a game, we would come up building things, and we would create our own challenge. We would get in fights, we would, do different things that aren't happening at the sports level today. And also, they were different. There were a lot of different things that we did during the day. I grew up with a bunch of boys, so they, think differently, and definitely less Barbie play and more let's roll down the hill type of play, and we push you one time and then we throw you the other time. So it was way more creative. I also, experienced that in Europe. In Italy, we just have a very, schools don't have sports, and the upper education is not fueled by athletics, and that is something very unique to the United States. So as someone from the outside that didn't participate in collegiate sports, I look at a lot of these kids are playing the sport that they are supposed to play from a very young age with no variance and with a level of commitment that it's unheard of. There's burnout. That's why there is so much burned out in kids that are 16, 17. They're exhausted of playing that sport. And I don't know if there is much joy in it.
Yeah.
I'm sure, it starts always as a game, right? You are going there and you're participating in this activity. And then when it becomes the moment of making a choice and becoming serious about it, then there is a continued layer of pressure that keeps adding and adding and adding And I think that takes away from the joy of why you're doing something.
Yes.
And then there is the parents, and then there is the lack of intermixing. They only do one thing for a very long time. There is a lot of research on injuries that happen that way. There is no variance in, movements, and you're being specialized at a very young age, which, results in a lot of injury. And also into the variance of who you are as an athlete. If you only do certain things, you lose the ability to be creative. That is a very good ability to have at a high level. You're going to be creative when you're playing the best of the best, and you have to figure out a way to score a point or to win the game. How are you going to do that? Right. So, it forces, I think variance forces you to think differently in very many different ways. When you practice a lot of sports, you get to be exposed to different challenges, and your brain gets stimulated in a different way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it's like, I've had to experience it firsthand. My son just loves basketball. I mean, that's all he wants to do. And there was a point where he lost the joy in it. Luckily, he's found it again. But he also, he just didn't want to focus on anything else. And finally, this past summer, just even going and like he can flip really well and like loves to get off diving boards and flip. And I'm like, even that, like, let's just do anything for a little while, just to kind of like separate yourself and get things going. And now he's interested in golf again. He's like, can I get Dad's old golf clubs? And I'm like, yes. But he, it's something that I've been trying to talk about for so long. And I digress a little bit, but you're right on point. And the reason I'm saying that, though, is because when you see people that you love holding on to something, like I have to play this one sport because I have to get into the D1 school, and I'm already thinking about this, and I'm only in the 6th grade. He's 8th grade now. But you know what I mean? And they're like seeing, oh wait, but these people are getting recruited now, and they're sophomores.
A lot of social pressure, which is
it's becoming just something that I don't even know how we can really. I don't know how we can really let it flow, like what you're talking about, and having just that creativity around it.
Right. I think a lot of that becomes social pressure, right? Mm-hmm. What are all my peers doing? What are all my peers' parents doing? And I would be interested in reading studies if there is on this, because this is just my mere opinion. A lot of the parents' involvement has to do with not wanting their kids to fail, not letting them fail. And going back to what I fundamentally believe, adversity will develop your character, and it will just fine-tune what you become later in life. He might not be a basketball player for the rest of his life. None of us are. We haven't discovered the secret for eternal youth yet. But that part, the parents not letting them fail. Mm-hmm. I think as adults, I know there is deep love for your kids, and you don't want them to suffer, and you don't want them to cry and do all these things because it's hurtful. But is it more of a hurtful element, or is it helping them later on in life?
Well, I think too, because as a parent, it hurts you, and if you haven't learned how, and I can say this from experience, I mean, my healing journey luckily has taught me to take care of my emotions. I can't stop their pain. I can't stop what they're going through, right? And I think as parents, coming from a very good place, like, oh wait, we want to keep them safe. We want to make sure they're happy. It's like, no, like they got to have their life, and they got to fail, and they got to do all these things. And when we can take away our emotions out of it and not attach to them, it makes it easiher to let them go and be who they need to be and to fail.
That's hard. It's hard to do.
Sometimes I have to go into the other room because I'm like, that happened to you, like, or my daughter, or like, this happened to you. And I'm like, I can just feel my emotions like wanting to tie into theirs. And I'm like, I'm going to step aside for just a second and come back. And I'm like,
yeah. Well, I was alone in that journey, so I didn't have an advocate. I played 8 years professionally overseas, and not once my parents came to watch me, or no one was there for me ever. which is sad. It's really sad because, you know, I signed my first pro contract and I brought it home that night. I was 16 years old and I was like, oh my God. And they were like, yeah,
That's
whatever.
16, you turned pro.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was interesting, you know, it was very sad at the time, which made me a lot of anger came out of that. But it, you know, it is, I recognize that it's hard it's hard in the moment, and I don't, you know, suggest that it's the approach, but it's a healthy balance, and a healthy harmony. I don't like using the word balance because I think life is like a song. So when you use the word balance, things are expected to be equal on sides, and that's not real. You know, you're not going to be equally happy and equally sad. You're not going to have equally sunny days and equally gray days. So I think about it as a song. I love dancing. I love music. It's one of the other things that makes me happy and feel alive. You know, I found in music a lot of joy. But when you think of life as harmony, you're gonna think about a really good song, like your favorite song, and think about the high of the song, you know, when it's about to drop, the build up. So you have a huge, oh, it's about to happen. And then you have a part of the song that is not always just amped up and it's just like raging, right? You have a part of the song that just somehow comes down and calms down and just beats differently and builds up again. And I think about life that way. You know, we have a harmony in our life that it is a clear understanding of sometimes you're going to have some high moments, sometimes you're not. And all that it still makes sense. It has rhythm and you dance to it and you sing to it and it makes you happy. And I think life is that way.
I love that.
It's like a song.
I love that so much.
So harmony over balance does it for me.